Hello, welcome to another Pen Talk. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining me as I explore the wide world of pens. This video is going to be a little different. Obviously, what you see in front of you may be a clue. We're going to talk about the Parker 51. And after an introduction and a little discussion of why this pen came into being, we're going to have an interview with Aidan Chao, who has restored a lot of pens, and he restored the Vacuumatic filler that's in this pen from 1948. I wanted to show all the bits and pieces real time. This isn't all because there's a number of pieces here in the Vacuumatic filling system. But Parker talked about how many pieces there were in the pen. So what Parker said was there are 23 components that make up a 51, and there are 238 manufacturing steps. Needless to say, those both are a lot. So the Parker 51 was the best-selling pen ever that Parker produced. Over the course of its lifetime, they sold 42 million pens, and that gave them revenue of $400 million. So that's pretty impressive. So what brought about the 51 was George Parker, the founder, passed away in 1937, and Kenneth Parker took over the reign. Parker was being beat in the pen marketplace. The Schaefer Balance was the most popular pen. Great shape, great design, reliable writer, came in a many variety of colors, sizes, and had a very loyal following. And right on Parker's heels was Waterman, which also had a great variety of pens. Was not as innovative, I don't think, as Schaefer or Parker, but they just did well. And then nipping at the heels were a number of lower tier pen companies. Obviously, we can't ignore the Eversharp Doric, Wherever, and obviously later on, a competitor was the Esterbrook, which had many nibs, which you, as the owner of the pen, could swap in and out the nibs. There's interesting perspectives on the Parker Quink ink. Parker wanted a quick drying ink, so they came up with a formulation. They got a PhD chemist to come in, and they came up with a formulation for Quink, but that formulation included a alcohol, and it was highly alkaline. Needless to say, a latex sac didn't survive well here, so Parker had to come up with something to create a pen that would be able to use the Quink ink. And that's one of the reasons for the 51 to come into existence. I think the ads for the Quink ink are certainly interesting, where they say you can't have time to fix it or afford to fix it. So this collector is kind of the key to the ink delivery system in a 51. And this is made of PMMA, a DuPont material, also called lucite, and is resistant to Quink ink. Nice ebonite feed. Not too many people talk about the tubular nib. To me, this nib has less metal in it, so it's less costly to produce. Parker was good at branding things. So this has Parker Made in USA on it. And it also has two initials, RUPL, which is ruthenium polonium. I should know how to pronounce it a little bit better. On the other side is 95, which I'm not really certain what that means. There's supposedly a date code on the nib, but I don't know what that is. On the barrel, they imprinted the Parker. In the date code, there's an 8 with 2 dots on either side of it. And of course, Parker, made in USA. Pen was eventually made in many, many locations. So here's a new, fully working Vacuumatic system. It has the plastic plunger, not the aluminum one. During the early 40s, when the war effort made a lot of materials very difficult to get, they replaced the aluminum with plastic. What happens is when you press this down, it opens up that diaphragm, pushes ink out through the breather tube, and then when you release it, it contracts, creates a vacuum, and pulls ink up. And as you do this multiple times, each time it forces out more ink, till eventually the ink level covers the top of the breather tube and you're full. So this screws in and out of the back of the barrel. There's a tool to take it in and out, something I've not been able to master. Just an interesting section. Again, the whole design had that streamlined, kind of like aircraft look to it. And they promoted that. And also to compete with the Sheaffer Balance. So what makes these pens nice is they came in a number of different shapes, varieties, colors. In doing my research on the 51, I came up with a term that Parker used, which was artificial obsolescence. So the fountain pen market in the 30s and 40s and into the 50s was very, very competitive. And there were the big three, Parker, Sheaffer, and Waterman. And Parker's idea was that you can continue to generate sales by coming out with new models, new colors, encouraging your customers to buy something new when what they already have still works fine. And that's what artificial obsolescence is, because of the need to have something new, something that you already own that works well now becomes obsolete because you need something new. Interesting concept. And I think you'll find that existed throughout Parker's realm. What I found interesting is when I looked for ads, even in the ads that I found in the 40s had Vacuumatics in them. And even though the 51 had been out for a couple years, here's some examples. So even though the 51 was out in 41, which was Parker's 51st anniversary, the Vacuumatic, I think, was still their flagship pen. And I think towards our mid to later 40s, then the 51 started becoming the dominant pen until later on. And then we get into the 50s and 60s and late 50s. Parker introduced a cartridge filling system into the 51. But meanwhile, Sheaffer's doing a PFM. Sheaffer came out with the snorkel in the early 50s. Again, revolutionizing, going on that artificial obsolescence and coming out with something new that people said they really got to have. And I think fast forwarding to 2021, that marketing approach is still dominant. A lot of my background information came from the Parker 51 book. I collect books. I've always collected books, and being into fountain pens, I collect fountain pen books. And I didn't realize that these books would become fairly valuable. They're limited edition books. Not a lot were published, and they're not going to be probably reprinted. So if you look at Amazon and eBay and places like that, you'll find the book is fairly expensive. I enjoyed reading it. Gives me a better appreciation of the Parker 51. I happen to be fortunate enough to have a few of these bottles of the original Parker Quink. I find this interesting as it's microfilm black. For writing on microfilm, it's permanent. And Parker was good at really putting a lot of verbiage on their ink boxes. And even when you pop it off, you still get more verbiage, which is very insightful. And of course, they're pushing the Vacuumatic pens. If we look at the bottle, it's interesting, you know, a kind of Art Deco look. I like the way that it looks. Very simplistic label. And the bottles, you know, have that identification on them. So if someone finds these in a landfill, they'll know it's a Parker ink. If you open it up, the ink is long evaporated. And I'm not going to reconstitute it. You know, here's a bottle I have of permanent blue black. Again, the same type of verbiage on this that was on the other one, and it was $2. Interesting price. And this bottle actually has a fair amount of liquid in it. It may never have been opened up. A little bit of a different cap on it, but the same bottle, the same type of label, and the same type of identification at the bottom. I also have this sitting in my collection, which the Shiro Trading Company Limited. I'm not exactly certain where this fit into the Parker marketing. Washable royal blue ink. The bottle is definitely different, and there's really nothing left in it. Certainly like the more vintage bottles better. So originally Schaefer had a classic arrow clip, kind of reminiscent of what's on the Vacuumatic, and they had the blue jewel to indicate lifetime, but the government said you can't do that anymore, so they stopped doing it, and they redesigned the clip, as you can see in these two on the top part. You know, these are all different colors. This bottom one is a Vacuumatic. These two are arometric fillers, and I know there's a lot of nostalgia about a Vacuumatic filling system, but I prefer the arometric. Easier to use, easier to clean, and they last a long time, much longer than the Vacuumatic filling system lasts. These pens are very well balanced, feel great in the hand. And this design, is, as we know, has been copied and duplicated. You know, Waterman came out with their taper light, which I think was influenced by the popularity of the 51. And I think Schaefer came out with their tubular nib, which, again, kind of brought some of that characteristics to play. But obviously, more expensive nib, lots of gold, and the Schaefers were more expensive than the 51s, at least in the ads that I've been able to find. During the latter part of the 40s, Parker decided to come out with a less expensive model, and this is the 21. Shares a lot in common with the 51, but it just, you know, the clip is not as ornate, less expensive to make, and it has this arometric filler. An easy way to find out what it is it's on the arometric filler. And this pen became Schaefer's most popular low-cost pen, around $5. To me, the interesting thing is when the 4 came out, the price for the least expensive one was $12.50. Now, at that time, the average wage was $30 a week. Now, the average wage is $1,000 a week. So that's more than 30 times. So if you took $12.50 and multiplied it by 30, you're going to get a lot of money, close to $400. So you can imagine what pens today are in the $400 market, and you can get an idea of where the 51 fit in the economics of the 40s. So I think you've heard me talk enough. Now we're going to talk with Aidan Chao and hear his views on the 51, why he enjoys it, and his restoration of many 51s, some of which you might want to own. Take it away. Thank you very much for watching my little intro on the 51, hopefully giving you some historical perspective on the iconic Parker 51 pen. I'm very happy to be able to introduce Aidan Chao to you, who is learned to be able to restore to full working order and close to their mint condition Parker 51s for those of you that might be interested in those pens. Let's hear what Aiden has to say about his exploration of the Parker 51. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm Aiden, and I've been collecting vintage pens for about 15 months, and we did another video exploring my journey as well. But in terms of Parker 51s, it was a pen that hadn't appealed to me in the beginning because of its simplistic design. But overall, I did enjoy the look of its hooded nib, and the first vintage pens that I looked at in modern pens were the Pilot E95s, which also had a semi-hooded nib, and I was appealed to that aesthetic. So the Parker 51 has a very interesting history that I've become more grateful and appreciative of as I've explored the pen more and more. My favorite line of fountain pens, and I'll tell everybody this, is the Parker 51s. These came in a streamlined look, had the Vacuumatic filler. These are Parker Vacuumatic, sorry, but they had the Vacuumatic fillers and the Parker Golden Arrow clips, as well as the striated celluloid material. Parker developed, while also selling the Parker Vacuumatics, the Parker 51, which was released in about 1941, which was the company's 51st anniversary, by a revolutionary, Kenneth Parker, who succeeded his father's business and really grew the Parker brand. So here was the first 51 they produced. You can see there's two jewels here, which is why we call this the double jeweled 51. In terms of the hood and nib, it's still there. And it also has the Vacuumatic filler system, which I can repair as well. This single jeweled 51 was the first generation of them, you could call it. And this was what inspired the popular myth of the 51 as the world's most wanted pen. This was an advertising slogan, the world's most wanted pen, because the pen was introduced around wartime, which is why there was a supply chain crisis, which led to these pens being ordered in mass quantities, but not being produced in these quantities, which means everyone wanted one, but couldn't either afford or be able to receive one due to the scarcity that was created by this crisis. So the Parker 51s then came to a more streamlined look with the, similar to the Vacuumatic, the tapered, smooth ends with the single jeweled 51s while retaining its golden arrow cap clip, which was emblematic of Parker. These pens kept on developing and had one of the longest runs of any fountain pen, well into the 60s, 70s, and sometimes even the 80s. And everyone who wanted a Parker 51 had one. Let's say Charles de Gaulle, Winston Churchill, Dwight D. Eisenhower. They all signed important paperwork with the Parker 51, which became known as the pen that won the war. It signed numerous treaties with dignitaries and generals using them to end the war with the Germans. And overall, this pen has just achieved this popular status as not only Parker's most famous and most well-sold pen, but also the pen that numerous people love for their impeccable quality. I myself appreciate this Cordovan Brown Parker 51 for its impeccable smooth nib, its wonderful filling system, and its unbelievably durable lucite, which was created for the purpose of durability, not for looks, but it's quite striking as well. But it was created for durability, and people such as Queen Elizabeth II of England still uses to this day, and there is video evidence of this. The Parker 51, the original one from the 1940s and 50s and 60s, to sign her official paperwork and write her official correspondence.
I think that was an excellent introduction. So one of the things that I think is good is for a new pen user, for somebody who's
Okay.
getting
Yeah.
into it, why do you think a 51 would be an important pen for them?
To me, the Parker 51 is brilliant as a pen for a new fountain pen user or just someone that likes to get a wonderful gold nib writing experiment that is unique and memorable. This pen is known and was known when it was being sold in the open market for its impeccable quality. For example, this Cordovan Brown Parker 51 that I have is a constant writer in my collection because of its wonderful hooded nib that writes an incredibly smooth, fine line. I believe the nib combined with the relative affordability of this pen, half the price of a new modern entry level gold nib pen, such as the Lamy 2000, which also has a hooded nib. It's got a very, very, very affordable price range for a gold nib pen, which is an overall benefit of vintage in general. But it's got that impeccable quality that's just lacking in many modern entry level gold nibs. It's got a very wonderfully smooth nib, but also an ebonite feed that can keep up, a relatively scarce thing nowadays. You don't have to worry about it cracking or deforming or not keeping up or railroading. It'll write smoothly without skips and won't dry out on you because of its hooded design, which was a brilliant advertising point by Parker. It also has a wonderful collector system, as Chris has shown before in the investigating the internal portions of this pen segment of this video. But the internals of this pen allow for a large ink storage, but also a capillary action system that allows for very little ink to be used up at once with the collector feed. The Parker 51, I think, is just a wonderful, low maintenance, carefree pen that can be inked up and used over and over again without fear of drying up, and is very friendly for a new user or a seasoned veteran of the fountain pen community. And I can assure you, as I've enjoyed Parker 51s for quite a while now, that this pen is one that you will get and want to get many, many more of because of its beauty, its sleekness, its elegance, its streamlined design, its wonderful nib, its wonderful writing experiment, and a plethora of other reasons that will keep you coming and coming and coming back to this particular legendary model.
I think that was excellent, and I think what's also good is that you were able to put in perspective how many of the historical figures that we all know
Yeah,
used the 51 as their daily writer, and
yeah,
the 51 played such an important role in many of the historical documents that kind of laid the ground rules for the
correct.
current world that we're in today.
Yeah, and
Well,
so did the duofold. We can compare two generals: Eisenhower, who was looking into the future and was quite a visionary, whereas Douglas MacArthur was a very conservative type of guy who held on to the philosophies of the past. Right? You can see their different personalities through the pens they used. Dwight D. Eisenhower signed the European Treaty on the Western Front with a 51. What did MacArthur use when he signed the treaty with the Japanese on that boat? He used a Parker duofold desk pen. Isn't that brilliant? You can just see right through them with their pen choices.
oh, that's an excellent historical reference.
Right?
I think the viewers would also be interesting if you could kind of like relate to them how you got into actually restoring the vacuumatic filling system,
Great.
and how that led you to also have a more of an appreciation for these incredibly good writing instruments.
As a pen user and collector, I've had quite a complicated relationship with the Parker 51. I didn't always start out as a fan. I preferred the more eccentric, flamboyant designs of the Parker Vacuumatic that stood out to me a little bit more. I loved the deep pearlescence of the Vacuumatic celluloids, or the gold overlays of Eversharp coronets and earlier gold-filled pens. But I never took into consideration the wonders that hid under the relatively low-profile cap of the Parker 51, this excellent hooded nib. I always liked the hooded nib design, but never tried one before getting the Parker 51, other than the E95S. The Parker 51's nib, even though the ink dried fast on the page, laid down a very wet and smooth line. It's a very pleasurable writing experience that I feel everyone would enjoy. I also believe that the Vacuumatic filling system is one of the most superior that's ever been created, although it is hard to maintain and repair. Learning how to repair them was a journey of trial and error, and I started just because of my interests in Vacuumatic pens. I really liked the design, so wanted to be able to tear them apart and investigate the insides. With my burgeoning repair practice, I thought that the next natural step was to offer Vacuumatic services, hence I learned how to restore them. That led me to a greater appreciation of the filling system, which I once viewed as antiquated, and also led me to a greater experience with and appreciation of the Parker 51, which I now view as an artifact of world history. It has influenced our world from our battlefields to the UN, to the World Forum, to embassies and business deals all over the world, because so many famous personalities and influential people have used them to sign documents that have changed our lives. I view the Parker 51 not only as a superior writing experience, but also as a article of history which is tangible and usable, that we can appreciate its impacts with over time. And I believe this pen is just something that is a overall pleasure to restore as well, and to service and to bring back to working order, because they're durable and they'll last for many, many years. So I would look forward to working on yours, because once it's restored, it'll last for a long time because it operates like a tank.
And I'll second everything that Aiden has just said, because I have some of his restored pens and they are excellent, and he has my strong recommendation. So if you're interested and have any 51s that you would like to get into pristine working order, please contact Aiden. We'll put his contact information in the video description. So in closing, Aiden, one question that is always on my mind is, what's next? You've gone from the Vacuumatic to the 51. Do you have anything on your horizon that you might delve into?
I think the next thing I'll be delving into is going back into the past. I think that's something that I really look forward to going into. I just bought my first Watermans yesterday. I was quite intrigued with the time period of the Great Gatsby and the interwar period, the Roaring 20s and the 30s that followed. I think being able to go back as a reference to the future of pens, which is like the 51 and the Vacuumatics, exploring pens like the dual fold, like Watermans and early Eversharps, is something that I'm greatly interested in right now. And I want to be able to further explore hard rubber. I want to be able to further explore Waterman's 52s and Waterman's lines of pens. And because of delving into the past, gain a greater appreciation for the development and the timeline that led to the Parker 51 that we have now. Look at these 4 pens, right? These are 4 pens that I grabbed. I was going to show this Sentinel as well, didn't have the time, but you can see these pens, right?
Yeah.
These are all 1940s to 50s pen. This one's 52. This is the latest, right? I have PFMs. I have more Vacuumatics. I have Royal Challengers, this and that. And those are all late 30s to early 50s. I want to go back.
No, I think that's
Yeah.
very admirable, and I think you'll be a big contributor to all of us in the pen community that also admire and respect the past and see how that is
Yeah.
represented in what you may call modern in the Vacuumatic and the 51s, and you talked about the PFMs, and then obviously Parker went into the 45s and the 75s,
Yeah.
and and then Parker also then went back into history and came back with a dual fold. So
yeah, and I was talking to a guy earlier. He received a gift from a client one time, which is a Parker dual fold Centennial in the blue marble. And I brought up fountain pens because he was talking about pens in general, and he was talking about the dual fold Centennial. And I said, "Did you know about 80 years before that pen of yours was manufactured, they were manufacturing pens that were virtually the same as the one you have in your hands right now?" And he went, "No, really?" And he and we started going on about Parker's history and about what led to the dual fold Centennial being a pen in the first place was because of the dual fold that existed back then, especially the dual fold senior.
well, that's excellent, and I
Yeah.
think it's great how you've been able to encourage and pen enable
Yeah.
many people, and
Yeah.
we all benefit from that because the more people involved in pens, that makes it a better experience for all of us. So I appreciate your time this evening.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, thank you all very, very much for those who have made it to this point in the video of learning about the history of the 51s, the journey that led to this legendary pen being created and loved by the fountain pen community and those around the world. And thank you for exploring with Chris and I fountain pens, new and old. And may you have many more writing experiences with your 51s and with your vintage and modern fountain pens, and think about this Parker 51 when you're thinking about your other pens, because of the fact that its invention and its development has led to so many fountain pen triumphs in the last half century. And I really look forward to contacting you and working with all of you on your Parker 51s and other fountain pens. And feel free to reach out. It would be a pleasure and honor to work with all of you. Thank you very much.
And I'll second everything Aiden said. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this video finds you safe, healthy, and happy, and enjoying your pens. And if you don't enjoy your pens as much as you would think, contact Aiden, and he would be very happy to increase your fountain pen enjoyment. So all of you have a great day and have a great pen experience, and we'll be in touch later. Bye.